She was going to change the world with a single drop of blood. One tiny prick of your finger, and a little machine could run hundreds of tests. Cancer, diabetes, everything, in minutes. Investors handed her hundreds of millions. The company hit a $9 billion valuation. She became the youngest self-made female billionaire on Earth, on magazine covers everywhere. There was just one problem. The machine didn't work. It never worked. And here's what makes this the perfect scam. She didn't hide a broken product. She built an entire reality around it. And the smartest, most powerful people in the world helped her sell it. Stick around, meet Elizabeth Holmes. In 2003, at just 19, she dropped out of Stanford to start a company. The pitch was genuinely beautiful. She was afraid of needles, and she hated that testing your blood meant big, scary vials in a lab that took days. So her idea, what if one drop from a finger prick could do it all? Cheap, instant, painless, from a tiny box in your local pharmacy. She named the machine Edison, after the great inventor. She called the company Theranos. And that hope was the product, because everyone wanted this to be real, a young woman revolutionizing a stale industry to help sick people. It was the perfect story, which is exactly why nobody looked too closely at whether it was true. And Holmes was a spectacular storyteller. She dressed only in black turtlenecks, deliberately styled after her idol, Steve Jobs. She spoke in a strikingly deep, slow voice. She gave mesmerizing talks about a world where no one would ever say goodbye to a loved one too soon because a disease was caught too late. People didn't just invest, they believed. And here's the masterstroke, the thing that turned belief into an empire. She assembled a board of directors unlike anything in tech. Not scientists, not doctors, statesmen. Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of Defense James Mattis, media titan Rupert Murdoch invested. George Shultz, a former Secretary of State, became her most powerful champion. Think about what that does. When Henry Kissinger vouches for you, who's going to raise their hand and ask, but does the little blood box actually work? The credibility of these giants became a shield. Nobody wanted to be the fool who doubted the next Steve Jobs. And when the credibility needed a little boost, Theranos manufactured it. To reassure investors, the company shared validation reports that appeared to carry the logos of pharmaceutical giants like Pfizer, implying those companies had tested and endorsed the technology. They hadn't. The logos had reportedly been added by Theranos itself. It's a tiny detail, but it tells you everything. When the real endorsements didn't exist, they simply drew them on. The validation snowballed into real deals. The pharmacy giant Walgreens signed on to put Theranos testing centers inside its stores. The grocery chain Safeway committed to a deal worth over $350 million and started remodeling hundreds of stores to make room. By 2015, Theranos was valued at $9 billion. Holmes was worth $4.5 billion on paper, and the company claimed it could test for over 200 conditions. Because none of the core promise was true, here's what was actually happening inside Theranos. The Edison machine simply could not do what Holmes said it could. It could only run a tiny handful of tests, and even those were often wildly unreliable. The technology to run hundreds of tests from one drop of blood, the entire reason the company existed, didn't work. So they faked it. When customers at Walgreens gave their finger prick samples, Theranos often couldn't test them on its own machines. Instead, and this is the part that's almost funny if it weren't so serious, they secretly ran many of the samples on big, ordinary commercial machines made by other companies. The exact clunky lab equipment Holmes publicly mocked. They were hiding standard machines in a back room to fake a revolution. And to make the demos look good for investors and VIPs, the company would run a fake sequence. A smooth animation, a rigged demonstration, so the machine appeared to work when important people were watching. If a real test failed mid-pitch, the screen would still show a confident result. The whole thing was theater. The lies stacked higher the bigger the audience got. Holmes told investors the devices were being used by the US military, that they were out in the field on medevac helicopters saving soldiers' lives. They weren't. There was essentially no such deployment. But our technology is trusted on the battlefield is a powerful thing to say to someone about to write you a check, whether or not it's true. For a while, the theater held. But two things were quietly building. First, the human cost. Real patients were getting real results from a machine that didn't work. People received false readings. Some were wrongly told they might be having a miscarriage. Some got incorrect results on tests as serious as HIV. These were people making life decisions based on numbers from a machine the company knew was unreliable. That is the part of this story that must never be played for laughs. Second, people on the inside couldn't stay silent. A young employee named Tyler Schultz, grandson of George Schultz, Holmes's biggest backer, saw what was happening and was horrified. He raised concerns internally, got nowhere, and eventually became a whistleblower, going up against a company defended by his own grandfather. It fractured his family. He and others took their evidence to an investigative journalist named John Carreyrou at the Wall Street Journal. In October 2015, Carreyrou published the story that broke it open. Theranos wasn't using its own machines, and the Edison gave unreliable results. Theranos did what frauds do when cornered. It denied everything and threatened everyone, reporters, whistleblowers, ex-employees, with lawsuits, trying to bury the truth in legal fear. But the dam had broken. Regulators inspected the labs and found serious violations. Walgreens ended the partnership. The magic $9 billion valuation evaporated. Forbes, which had crowned her a billionaire, revised her net worth to zero. By 2018, Theranos was done, dissolved completely. Then came the reckoning. Holmes was charged with fraud. Her trial ran for months. And in January 2022, a jury convicted Elizabeth Holmes of defrauding investors, conspiracy, and multiple counts of wire fraud, tied to over $100 million. Her partner and company president, Sunny Balwani, was convicted in a separate trial. In November 2022, she was sentenced to more than 11 years in prison, and began serving that sentence in 2023. The youngest self-made female billionaire in the world. Net worth, zero. Address, a federal prison. So how did the smartest investors, the most powerful statesmen, and two of America's biggest retailers all get fooled by a box that didn't work? Here's the uncomfortable answer, and it's the whole point of this channel. They weren't buying the technology. Almost none of them ever demanded to see it truly work. They were buying the story, the beautiful, hopeful, world-changing story of a young genius in a black turtleneck who would save lives, and a story that good makes people not want to check. That's the terrifying mechanism. It wasn't that Holmes hid the truth so well, it's that the story was so appealing that the people with the power to catch her didn't want to. Kissinger's name on the board didn't make the machine work. It just made everyone stop asking if it did. We keep landing here. Value is a story. And when the story is beautiful enough, when it flatters us, or gives us hope, or comes wrapped in famous names, we will pour billions into a box we never once asked to open. Honest question for the comments: if a 19-year-old in a turtleneck pitched you this today with Henry Kissinger on the board, would you have written the check? Be honest. Most people would have.